Good afternoon and welcome. You will be the first audience to hear the entire set of 11 pieces, Constellations, in a recital performance. It is a great privilege for me to be able to present this premiere performance. Over the past months, I've enjoyed getting to know these engaging works, and I am certain you too will enjoy them. Before presenting the premiere of these pieces, I will present background information on the composer and the inspiration for and evolution of this set. I first met Dana Wilson my sophomore year at Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York. Wilson was my teacher for third and fourth semester music theory, third semester sight singing, and an experimental course, jazz class piano. My classmates and I found his teaching energetic and engaging. It is uncommon for someone to make what can be dry subjects like music theory and ear training fun. Wilson's particular gift for teaching was making such courses seem relevant. He drew upon examples not only from the Western European art music tradition, but also from jazz and popular music, and from a variety of non-Western cultures not normally studied in such courses. He encouraged the same sense of relevance and exploration in our work as students. In addition to completing written assignments from textbooks and worksheets, we would put our theory into practice by composing music for our classmates to play. We would practice our ear training by transcribing music we were listening to outside our schoolwork. In addition to his exemplary work as a teacher, Wilson could be heard as a jazz pianist in gigs around Ithaca and in performances with guitarist Steve Brown, his jazz faculty colleague. Wilson's creativity as a pianist equaled that of his teaching. In the years since my undergraduate days, Wilson has established himself as a composer of great skill and renown. A glance at the list of his compositions in your program demonstrates just how active he continues to be. Although I am familiar with only a small sampling of this body of work, I always find his music thought-provoking, logical both theoretically and technically, musically expressive, and above all, communicative. An expanded tonal language combines with rhythmic and harmonic elements of jazz in a unique fusion that contains familiar sounds and gestures in novel settings and applications. The pieces you will hear today, Constellations, embody this stylistic trend. Recognizable elements of jazz underlie and inform a compelling creative voice. The composer and I have been in conversation about his writing a set of teaching-level piano pieces that explore different styles and historical periods in jazz music. The inspiration for this project has arisen over the last several years. In April of 2007, I presented a recital of art music written in the jazz idiom and included Wilson's 2005 work, Sound Travels, on the program. In 2008, I secured a commission from the Nebraska Music Teachers Association, or NMTA, for a set of 5 piano pieces, Persona. I gave the premiere performance of these works at the NMTA State Conference that October. In March of 2009, when Wilson sent me a different final movement for Persona, he also included a brief piano piece, a gift for Karen, inspired by visiting with my wife and me after the premiere performance of Persona. In April of 2013, I gave an informal premiere of A Gift as an encore at a Hastings Symphony concert. At that point in time, I asked the composer if he had ever completed the projected set of piano pieces which was to include A Gift. He had not, and our discussions about this commission then ensued. You will hear a slightly revised version of A Gift as the 8th piece, Andromeda, in Constellations. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the financial support of the Imagine Grant Foundation at Hastings College. Imagine grants provide funds to Hastings College students, faculty, and staff to, quote, support creative projects exploring vocation, faith, service, and meaning as they intersect with career paths, end of quote. A few years into the Imagine Grant program, representatives of the Center for Vocation, Faith, and Service visited the individual academic departments of the college to encourage increasing the number of applications for this program, as a significant amount of the funds remained unused. We faculty members were invited to explore projects with broader emphases than were initially advertised. I was encouraged by this meeting to consider the intersection of my vocations as a teacher, scholar, performer, and student, particularly in light of my sabbatical study of jazz this past academic year. Last year, I studied jazz by working through some of the more comprehensive texts on jazz harmonic and melodic practices. An offshoot of this project was performing a recital of jazz-inspired art music, including Wilson's pieces, Sound Travels, and Persona, and recording a compact disc of this program. I undertook this particular study of jazz because of a lifelong interest in the style, and because as an educator, I am often approached by students wanting to learn jazz. As my research unfolded, I found a significant body of teaching-level pieces that explore the jazz language with technically and musically approachable challenges. I appreciate Wilson's willingness to work within the confines of writing pieces suitable for the advancing pianist. Constellations are musically and technically sophisticated pieces that bear all the trademarks of Wilson's mature style. They are, however, short and contain enough repetition to make them more accessible for developing piano students. That said, they never talk down to the student and successfully walk the fine line between engaging and challenging the pianist. I will now quote from an email from Wilson dated December 13, 2013, which accompanied these pieces. Quote, "They're not all easy teaching pieces, but in most cases, once an opening section is learned, the rest of the piece is the same, but in a different register. I also think they teach a good deal about what pianistically goes into playing in certain jazz styles, and I hope that's illuminating. Above all, I hope they're just good pieces that players at various levels and audiences will enjoy." End of quote. Citing an email dated January 15, 2014, Wilson noted that the title concept Constellations, quote, "gives some unity to the set and perhaps evokes something, but he cautioned that all such allusions are loose. He added that he purposely avoided giving them titles like Blues for Sam, as it seems that those titles have become expected when writing jazz-inspired music." End of quote. In the brief references that accompany each piece, sent in an email dated July 25, 2014, Wilson reiterated that, quote, "The link between the titles and the music itself is abstract at best, sometimes obvious, as in Pegasus, for example, sometimes not particularly relevant or helpful in listening." End of quote. The great benefit of working with a living composer is the ability to discuss the pieces, how and why they work, why choices were made, and the like, instead of relying upon one's skills and experience in score reading and interpretation. Instead of trying to decipher what they wrote across the distance of time, we can know exactly what a person is trying to say and why. Interacting with Wilson has in some cases confirmed my readings of individual pieces, and in others, encouraged me to explore different interpretations than I had at first chosen. I enjoy hearing premiere performances of commissioned works at the annual conferences of the Nebraska Music Teachers Association because one gets to hear these new compositions twice. The composers are present to provide commentary and answer questions between the two performances. I will adopt this format for today's recital with some modifications. First, I will present a description and analysis of each individual piece, followed by a performance of that piece while the description is still fresh in your minds. Next, I will discuss the pedagogical aspects of that music, namely, what pianists can learn about playing the piano and playing jazz through this set. Finally, I will present a second performance of the set in its entirety. Your program includes composer's notes on the pieces and performance notes. While I will periodically refer to these in my lecture, I invite you to read these thoroughly at a later time. Also, at this point in time, I do have one request. All performers appreciate applause. However, I would like to ask you to hold your applause, should you want to applaud, until the very end of the program. And thanks. Although the eighth piece, Andromeda, is the inspiration for constellations, the music for Aries was written first. Wilson revisited and significantly revised the original fifth movement of the set Persona as the basis of Aries. Wilson had withdrawn this movement, Persona, replacing it with what he called a, quote, more colorful burner, end of quote. In other words, a more effective ending piece. Aries was the first piece Wilson sent me as a pilot to see if it was acceptable for this project. Initially, he titled the piece Slide Stride Boogie. A broken left-hand pattern emulates a walking bass that energizes the texture and sets the tonality. While the left hand tends to live in G minor, the right hand plays a melody using the G major blues scale, which leads to some interesting and at times humorous dissonances. There are two brief ventures into the relative major, B-flat major. Example 1 shows the opening of Aries. I invite you to pay particular attention to the middle section of the piece, which sounds a lot like a written-out improvisation. I will now perform Aries. Perseus is one of two pieces in constellations that use Latin rhythms and gestures frequently found in jazz. Perseus is a relaxed samba. As in Aries, a catchy syncopated left-hand ostinato, that is, a repeating pattern of pitches and rhythms, underlies this piece. Example 2a shows the opening melody of Perseus, which follows two measures of the left-hand ostinato. The melody is first stated in single notes. A second statement ensues, now harmonized in parallel thirds. A third statement of this melody is more intricate rhythmically. This time will be harmonized in parallel sixths. At this point, a dramatic detour to the remote key of D-flat major interrupts this third statement. The hands play an insistent melodic idea, parallel and 2 octaves apart. This is seen in example 2b. This detour then leads to a fragmentary fourth and final statement of the main theme. I will now perform Perseus. After two up-tempo pieces, Eridanus provides a welcome reflective moment in this cycle. In Eridanus, Wilson activates several layers of texture and registers at the same time. In the left hand, there is an anchoring low bass pedal tone, often held for entire measures at a time, and a rhythmically more active tenor line. In the right hand, two pairs of chords, one rising and the next falling, occupy the register, while a haunting melody soars atop this texture. Example 3 shows the opening of Eridanus. Note these 4 layers of texture. Later in this set, you will find similar textural procedures in Andromeda. Formally, Eridanus is a wonderful study in finding creative ways to set the recurring melody in 3 different registers. I will now play Eridanus. Like its namesake, the winged horse Pegasus, this movement is fleet. The composer uses a configuration that is shared between the hands. The left hand not only anchors the beat and the meter, but also provides melodic outlines amid the whirling 16th notes. You'll note that the time signature changes frequently, moving from 4-beat measures each divided into 3 parts to 3-beat measures divided in 2s. This shifting metric stress adds to the excitement of the movement. Later repetitions of this melodic idea change registers and are bolstered by chords and octaves. Example 4 shows the opening of Pegasus. I will now perform Pegasus. Gemini is one of the shorter works in the cycle. The right hand presents a swinging, relaxed melody atop 4-note chords featuring sevenths and ninths. This melody is doubled by the top of the left hand using the drop 2 voicing technique. The left hand not only doubles the right hand melody, but also adds a supportive bass line to enrich the texture. There are essentially 2 parallel statements of the same theme with a surprise change of dynamics at the ending. Example 5 shows the opening of Gemini. And I will now perform Gemini. Like the first 2 pieces, Ursa Major uses a repeating left-hand pattern to provide the beat. A melody frequently employing the minor blues scale plays off this lumbering left hand. Wilson, however, denies our expectations for a blues piece by departing from the standard blues chord progression. Successive statements of the theme occur in C minor, followed by E flat minor and F sharp minor. That is, each time moving up by minor third. Note the playful ending where the third and final statement of the main theme is augmented through longer note values. Example 6 shows the opening of Ursa Major. And I will now perform Ursa Major. Taurus is, as marked, a funky piece that relies heavily upon syncopated rhythms. The main chord in this piece has been heard earlier in the set, but now is even more prominent. That chord is a so-called sharp ninth chord, so common in jazz. As shown in example 7b, this chord contains a root, major third, minor 7, and minor, or sharp ninth rather, which is a minor third on top, and this creates the clash so typical of jazz and the blues. Example 7a shows the opening of Taurus. As with Ursa Major, the composer starts with a standard blues progression that then leaves a pattern to modulate upward by minor thirds. Here's the opening of Taurus. And I will now perform Taurus. As I mentioned above, Andromeda was originally called A Gift for Charon. This piece inspired me to seek the commission that led to the creation of the entire set of constellations. Like the third piece, Eridanus, Wilson explores several strands of texture simultaneously. A bass line starts the piece, followed by a pair of slow chords in the middle register. At last, a plaintive melody enters atop this bass line. That appears as your next example. Three complete statements of this idea are presented, growing in intensity through the third statement. This then culminates in a reflective start of a fourth and final statement, which evaporates in the top register of the piano. I will now perform Andromeda. Hydra is a great example of tracking a short one-measure idea through a minor blues progression. As in Pegasus, the two hands share the musical materials. The opening of Hydra appears in example 9. As in Ursa Major and Taurus, Wilson departs from the expected blues progression with not one but two surprises: a sudden chord shift and then a change to a single-line bass melody, as seen in measure 7 of example 9. After two full statements of the main section, we encounter yet another thematic area, as seen in measure 17 of your example. A third statement of the opening melody then returns, rapidly switching registers and rushing headlong to the emphatic close. I will now perform Hydra. Cassiopeia is a meditation upon several types of chords played in parallel motion above a bass pedal tone. Example 10a shows the opening phrase of Cassiopeia. The rising first half of this phrase uses diminished chords. The falling second half uses cooler, less dissonant chords containing thirds and fourths. I will now play that opening phrase from your example. The three chords in example 10b show just how subtle and yet different these three chords are. They are produced simply by changing the bass note by half steps, creating a major chord, diminished chord, and a suspended fourth chord. The first chord is major. By changing the bass a half step, we get a diminished chord that informs the first half of each phrase. And changing the bass yet another half step, suspended fourth ninth chord, which is that cooler sounding chord in the second half of the phrases. After three successively intensified statements of the melody, the opening tonality, chords, and pedal tone A's return. Here I want you to notice how subtle the use of the pedal tone is. It appears in both the extreme registers of the piano, and then recurs in either only the treble or the bass. Out of context, the penultimate chord, which is D-flat major, should sound consonant, except it's not at rest and it has to resolve to the final diminished chord. And I will now perform Cassiopeia. Canis Major uses Latin rhythms and gestures, as did Perseus. Whereas Perseus was a relaxed Brazilian samba, Canis is a frenetic Cuban montuno. Canis starts playfully with three very simple chords, C, F, and G major, very basic triads using only white keys that all beginning piano students learn. What ensues is a syncopated melody, see example 11, set atop a strong, syncopated, and often unrelated bass line. It is as if, as the composer states, the bass player is in his own world, seldom playing together with the right hand and, for that matter, on a strong beat. Here is Canis provides a perfectly playful end to the cycle Constellations, and I will now perform Canis Major. The next heading on our program is What Constellations Can Teach the Advancing Piano Student. Rather than chart every occurrence of basic technical skills like scales, chords, arpeggios, and double notes, I will instead focus on three broader concepts: harmony, counterpoint, and tone color. As pianists, we are called upon to do more than one thing at a time, often simply just because we can. Contrasted with other musicians who sing or play single-line melodic instruments, pianists are capable of producing more than one tone at a time. In fact, with our 10 fingers, we can produce at least 10 notes at a time. Composers have exploited these harmonic capabilities from the earliest days of the piano. As with harmony, pianists are often capable of performing more than one melody at a time. Finally, much as pianists presumably enjoy the tone of our instrument, we are often taught to imitate the colors and tones of the human voice and the instruments when playing. Constellations explores the rich extended harmonic language of jazz, that is, the ability to play chords with added 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths. Pieces like Gemini and Cassiopeia in particular explore these rich chords. Constellations also provide ample opportunity to develop our contrapuntal skills. As the composer states in the performance notes, his pieces explore the social origins of jazz. Many of these pieces, particularly Aries, Perseus, and Canis, offer great challenges in coordinating repetitive figures with significantly differing melodic ideas. We are, in essence, called upon to emulate a jazz combo within the scope of our two hands. I feel that the most important concept that Constellations explores is a pianist's ability to do several different things at once through the sophisticated use of pedal, voicing, and tone color. Pieces like Eridanus and Andromeda require the performer to identify and track many layers of texture and color: low, tolling bass pedal tones, accompanimental gestures in the tenor and alto registers, and a singing melody in the soprano register. My use of vocal part terminology is intentional and telling. The final heading on your program is an exploration of what Constellations can teach the classically trained pianist about jazz. At this point, I feel the need to make two disclaimers. First, after a year of jazz studies, I feel comfortable considering myself just a beginner in this field. Second, the jazz tunes I will now perform are pieces that came to mind when I was learning Constellations. I am in no way suggesting that these works inspired or influenced the composer in writing his music. These are just some jazz tunes that, to my ear, resemble gestures in Wilson's pieces. For the classical pianist, some movements of constellations can then serve as springboards to studying similar jazz tunes. Constellations can teach, as the composer stated, quote, a good deal about what pianistically goes into playing in certain jazz styles, end of quote. Wilson has meticulously notated so many expressive details in his score. By scrupulously following every staccato, accent, tenuto mark, rest, and by noticing whether notes are connected or detached, the classical pianist can make great strides towards sounding like a legitimate jazz pianist. I have already highlighted a few of the jazz scales and chords that appear in these pieces. Additionally, one can learn about various standard jazz styles or prototypes through these pieces. In my description of the individual movements and constellations, I often refer to the use of blues progressions. The piece Hydra is probably the clearest parallel to a minor blues progression, until the two surprising twists that I noted. I will now play a minor blues tune, 5 Spot After Dark, to illustrate a minor blues piece. This is example 11 on your handouts. In my discussion of the chords used most frequently in Cassiopeia, I noted a dissonant diminished chord that underlies the melody of the first half of each phrase. This chord. The composer mentioned that during his own jazz playing days, he frequently borrowed this chord from Herbie Hancock. I noted that the chords in the second half of each phrase are so what chords drawn from the Miles Davis tune of the same name. These would be the suspended fourth, 7th, 9th chords. And I will now play through the opening of So What, which is example 12 in your handouts. I was struck by the similarity of the chord progression between Perseus and Blue Bossa. These chord progressions appear side by side as example 13b in your handouts. The similarity of these progressions influenced my tendency to play Perseus a little too slowly. I will now play Blue Bossa, which is example 13 on your handouts. After spending more time with the faster tempo indication for Perseus, I started to see parallels with an up-tempo Latin tune, Spain, by Chick Corea. Both pieces have bass line figures that outline widely spaced chords with syncopated rhythms. Both pieces also use parallel sixths for a statement of the melody, and, most interesting, both pieces have highly intricate rhythmic patterns with the melody played in unison 2 octaves apart. I will now play a little bit of Spain, which is example 14 on your handouts. The A minor tonality and the first measure of aridness immediately called to mind George Gershwin's aria Summertime from the opera Porgy and Bess. In aridness, the pedal tone A and E sustained under the middle voice, F sharps and G sharps, bear an uncanny resemblance to the accompaniment of the Gershwin. Of course, by the second measure, however, Wilson has taken a completely different direction in his piece. Here's the opening of aridness and the opening of the Gershwin version of Summertime. You can hear similarity of key and also chords in those. Summertime is often found in fake books transposed to the key of D minor. I include a chart of this as example 15b on your handouts. This transposition inspired me to explore a bit of a synthesis of Gershwin's melody with chords inspired by Miles Davis's So What, which I will now play. I included these few jazz tunes to show how a classically trained pianist might use techniques and styles so carefully and successfully notated in Constellations to explore some standard jazz literature. If anything, I hope that these examples highlight the genius of Dana Wilson. There is nothing derivative about this set. It has neither borrowed nor imitated a style or piece, but instead has convincingly absorbed, assimilated, and transcended the languages of art, music, and jazz in his cycle. In summary, while pianists can learn a great deal about playing the piano and playing jazz through these works, above all, they have a new set of very enjoyable pieces to hear and play. Before I perform the 11 Constellations without interruption, some concluding thanks are in order. First, to Dana Wilson for agreeing to write the set and for working so closely with me as I prepared this presentation. To Robin Kuzer for coordinating the help of Roger and Cheryl Shukai and Dan Lang in video recording and streaming this performance. To the Imagine Grant Foundation for co-funding this commission, and of course, to Karen. Thank you all once again for your kind attendance today. I will now perform the 11 Constellations uninterrupted.